Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the episode today, we have Luis Hernandez. Louis, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Thomas. I'm excited to be here.
It is very much my pleasure. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So, Luis Hernandez, I'm out in Denver, Colorado, in the United States. I primarily what I do is I sell real estate. Um, right now, I'm refocusing on homes, but I've done everything from commercial land development. Uh, Also done some real estate investing. Just fix and flipping homes, holding, building portfolios. You name it. I've kind of done it. And then more recently, I've started this new venture about a year and a half ago, which is my own personal podcast called the Wayfinder Show. And we just help people, we try to inspire people to level up in some area of their life. And that's really been a passion project that I'm hoping to turn into more than that because it's what I really enjoy doing.
Okay. Well, thank you for the introduction.
Thank you.
I over the before we were messaging, before we were recorded, I was looking over the what should we say, the profile, and I was interested to talk to you about your story just because you seem to have learnt a lot from your journey. So if you were to start in relation to where you feel your story begins, where would you start?
Yeah, the story I mentioned that I'm working on some kind of project that I haven't figured out what the format will be yet. Maybe it's a book, maybe it's a white paper, or maybe it's a talk. I'm not sure. I'm kind of right now. I'm calling it running away to find your way, and it's a kind of my journey of how long distance running has helped me really develop the soft success skills that many people have. That I don't think I had growing up the way I did. I kind of grew up in a life of uh, in a life of poverty. I mean, we grew up very poor in between New York City and outside of Providence, Rhode Island. My parents were immigrants from Colombia, South America. Didn't really know English till about the third grade here, and my parents never learned English. They worked factories and cleaning jobs, and we helped them from a very young age, not only to even just help pay for the rent for the household. So that kind of environment, the neighborhood was one of those tough inner city environments, that you often see movies about, like Stand By Me or such, that, there's all kinds of violence and not much hope and that kind of stuff. And I was very lucky. I did well, and I got away and got a scholarship to go to Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts, and it kind of got me out of that. And I did, and in my early 20s, I did really well with real estate. And, by my late 30s, I had done much better than I could have ever imagined, right? And had um, surpassed a seven-figure net worth and, had my dream home and married to my dream girl and had great kids and everything. And then, when 2008 came, really got hit hard and we lost it all again. Um, so that kind of set off this journey. I got into obviously a heavy depression, everything. If I didn't have, if my kids weren't around and very young, who knows what it would have meant, but you try to hang on for them. And, and along the way, I got into long distance running. Had a friend who from college that, is that friend who's very non-athletic, kind of clumsy, and you would just not, think of as a marathon runner. But I hadn't seen him in about 5 years, and I went to go visit him, and he said and just caught up, and he said he was running a marathon. And I thought, that's silly, you of all people, really. And just we're that kind of friends. We were roommate in colleges. We poke fun at each other a lot, and it still seemed funny to me now, even that he was doing that. But I was intrigued. I'd never known anybody who'd done one. At that point in my life, it gave me a new goal to go for. I'd always kind of been type A, goal oriented, and that got me going down that road, that path. And he gave me a book called the Non-Runners Marathon Training. It's a journal, essentially, about 16-week training plan. It's a college class. I think the professors are at the University of Idaho, if I remember correctly. And the book, they people join this class, and to pass, you pretty much just have to run a marathon by the end. And so I followed it, and and that began my journey. From there we moved to Denver, Colorado. Started to meet people through running, and I just realized that the people I was meeting were just a different level of people that I had ever been around. They accepted me. They taught me a lot. Um, I saw that they had these big goals and they went after them in certain ways that just kind of really helped reframe my mindset about all that, and helped me embrace the journey as opposed to the result. And it really just helped turn my life around.
Thank you for that. There's like three things that I want to follow up with you based on your answer. So
Sure.
a lot to delve into there. You mentioned the poverty at a young age. Couple of different things. One of them being, do you think there are any positive things that you took from that experience? Because
Hmm.
often I think a work ethic comes from that background. Do you think that's true for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I never get asked that. I agree with you. I definitely think the way we look at work ethic is a little. I've grown to appreciate it both ways, right? Yes, I am not afraid of working hard. I still do. I get up early and go to bed late working. I'll take on any task. There's nothing beneath me. I now have, an MBA, and I've had quite a bit of success and everything, and I'm still not afraid to go and, scrub a toilet or whatever it takes. I think that those are values you get. Um, just not to put anything above, that is never treat anything as being beneath you, and as well as, yes, the work ethic. However, I've met a lot of really successful people that I didn't think of as work. I think I always thought of work in the blue collar way, the physical way, right? You show up, you work with your hands, and that's real work. And something I didn't appreciate, I think, especially going to 08, 09, was, this idea of creating value, and even through others, right? Oftentimes that's work, right? Like visualizing. I'm taking the simple example of a house that you flip, right? I When I got really good at it, I'd buy a house that was all beat up, and come up with a vision of how it can be really beautiful and who the end buyer could be and how that could help turn around that neighborhood and such. And but I didn't do most of that work, right? Hardly any of it. I mean, I started doing that, but I think I got to a point where at the end of that, I hired people to do it. They all took care of it. They sold it, almost everything, and I would just check in once in a while. And that managerial work and thought thinking work, like I didn't think of as work, So sometimes when I would start to get paid, I felt like I didn't deserve this. Like I didn't deserve the pay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd get a big old check, and I was like, wow, it just came like magically out of nowhere. I didn't earn this. And there was a worthiness factor there. I think that I wasn't prepared to deal with, or appreciate that. I think that life in poverty, growing up doesn't allow you to develop. Does that make
Well, I
sense?
certainly I'm totally on the same page as you in relation to sort of like the difference between manual labor and work. And you said a good phrase, which is the creation of value. You get paid for creating value, even if you don't necessarily work that hard. But I'm interested to know how you went from, because some people, when they get a big check and they don't think of it as work, there's some self-sabotage that goes along with that. So I'm
Right.
interested to know how you overcame that or perhaps changed your mindset on that issue.
Yeah, there was definitely some self-sabotage. I mean, I drank heavily, started um just making decisions that stunted the growth. Probably I have a very self-deprecating way of talking about myself, and usually I think of it as humorous, but I think that sometimes gets interpreted in a way that, limits you from things, from getting, you know, uh taken seriously in a way, and that's something that we don't recognize. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. You
So
can put yourself down to the point where people will believe you. But there's also a
yeah,
phrase that I heard, which is if you don't sell yourself, no one else will.
yeah,
But
good
I'm
point.
assuming you're through that place now, is that right?
Oh yeah, I now my ego is uncontrollable.
Yeah.
Um, I think I've learned to just become very self-aware. Um, much, maybe there's still some blind spots, but I think for the most part that's something I work on highly. Like, what am I truly good at? What am I better than anybody else at? And sometimes I don't even know, and I'll try to put myself in a room in an area where I think I'm pretty good, and this might sound awful, but you don't really know how good you are at something until you're in a room with other people who are really good at it, right? It's like using a running analogy. You don't really know how fast you are until you enter a race, right? And then there you know that you're faster than others or what have you. And then that gives you an extraordinary amount of confidence to, you know, present yourself as an expert in some area, right? Or if it also gives you confidence because you know where you're lacking and it gives you the feedback so you can go back and work on those areas that need improvement.
Well, before we move on from that, should we say, section of your life, if you were to speak to someone who was in poverty, whatever that means to you, and they were open to your advice about getting out of it, what would you tell them?
Oh, great. I would say, you know, first of all, believe in yourself, understand your self-worth, and don't be afraid to charge for it. You know, I think a big part of it is actually mindset. The interesting part is my second go around. So after we lost everything and we struggled financially for many years, and I never really ever felt that same level of scarcity that we felt as kids. You know what I mean? I still was able to always find a way to provide no matter what. And so it never, so I think poverty is actually a mindset. And now as I've developed more wealth, I I realize that even every level, wealth is actually much more of a mindset when, because now I'm at a stage where I might still not have any money. But I'm not afraid and I know like, okay, we got to get this and that. And I can sit down and quickly figure out how to create that wealth, that's necessary. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the phrase that I heard was something along the lines of there's a difference between being broke and being poor. And being poor is essentially like you say, a mindset. Being broke is essentially a temporary cash flow position. But yeah, the next you've mentioned it a couple of times, and I have spoken to a few people who have suffered some pain through the what do you call it? The real estate crisis. Was it 2008 for you? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And I might be wrong, but in the instances where I have spoken to people about this, there has been some learnings or some lessons that came out of it, as difficult as it may have been. So, did
Yeah.
that apply to you?
Yeah, 100%. I think I still am learning to this day, right? So, back then, everybody I knew who was in real estate, except for like one or two people, really, they all lost it all, right? And there was a level of acceptance with it, like, oh, it's not our fault. Um, it was the market's fault, right? And there's some truth to that, right? The market obviously impacted our industry more than any other. However, there's still a lot of people who got very, very wealthy during that time. They had incredible success. Um, like wealth, they created wealth that changed their future generations during that time. So I was fascinated by that. I just kept thinking, what is it that, there are some people who saw this coming, and I really had to learn what that was so that wouldn't happen again, and I could take advantage of it and be in a better position next time. So I dedicated myself to learning, uh, market cycles, macroeconomics, factors and stuff like that. What impacts all of these things, so you can kind of see it coming and how to position yourself for it. This was not something I was aware of before. I just, recognized how to fix a beaten up home and create better value for it, and got good at that. And there are some influences outside of our control, and we should be able to recognize them and learn how to work with them, right? So, I dedicated, that was the first part. That's the more academic, technical, um, learnings I dedicated myself to. So I went back to school, got my MBA, just studied a lot of the works of like Howard Marks, who's big into market cycles, uh, and such. And then there's the more important work, though, is the internal work, right? So what happened leading from 2001, 2002 to about 2008, 9 was, I was just a young kid with a very ambitious and was willing to work hard and had a vision, work through it. At first I was very disciplined. I would make a plan for a property, and that was a scope of work with a budget and timeline and what have you. And if I did that, I thought I could get so much of a return. Well, for the first few, actually for very many of them, it took me longer and it cost me more to build these places, than I ever planned for. And yet, on the back end of that, I still made just as much, if not more, than I had anticipated. Okay. And that was, I thought, during that time, my ego got to a point where I just thought, okay, I'm a genius, right? No matter what, I can't go wrong. I'm unstoppable. Okay. And what I didn't realize is there was they had that saying like a rising tide lifts all boats. I was in a rising tide and I didn't recognize that. And so it's a very dangerous way of learning, because you start to develop bad habits of in your underwriting and in how you do things generally, even ethically, I would argue. But so I started to just start from scratch, as in a tougher environment, how to rebuild oneself. And realize that, okay, I'm not brilliant. Like, there are other factors, just that can, like, while those other factors can take you down, they can also bring you up. And for many years, they brought me up. It was only one time they brought me down, and that one time was catastrophic, right? They call them black swan events. Um, but I think we need to, that those lessons were the more, probably something I'm still learning, you know, just how to rebuild oneself, right?
Yeah, it sounds like you learn an awful lot as a result of it. And
Hmm.
I think it reminds me of a quote which says something along the lines of, you learn more by losing than you do by winning.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm interested to know, because you mentioned about learning from market cycles, what you think about the, I don't know if economy is the right term, but the cycle that we're in now, like what you see or what your thoughts are.
Oh yeah. I'm a little nervous about this cycle, this market we're in now, actually. I think we have, and I'm talking more about the States than the world right now, although I do think that there's a lot of risk factors in the world. I think that we have a lot of money on the sideline waiting for really big opportunistic deals, but those are all by the big, hedge funds and such, venture funds. You know, uh, Blackstone here, I'm sure everybody's heard of Blackstone. They created a company called Invitation Homes, and they took advantage of the '08 crisis and became the largest landlord in the country. So over a period of just a few years, they became the biggest land. They went from having nothing to being the biggest landlord in the country. And what they recognized, that they could buy a whole bunch of small, the single family homes and rent them out, and watch them appreciate in the meantime as well. So there's a lot of that. So but they waited for, like, till things got really bad. And so I'm not seeing that yet. I'm not seeing like something's gotten really, really bad where you see somebody, those opportunistic funds that are out there really taking advantage at that level. I still think that there's more to go. And we hear some of the same things we heard in 2008. Oh, there's not enough housing. That's a big argument. You hear how there's not enough housing. Well, housing can actually people don't realize this, but it can be created very quickly. And this is a counter argument to what you hear, but people go from right now. You have a whole lot of multifamily houses that have buildings that have all gone up in the last few years, and they're going to all be delivering over the next 2 to 3 years. And because of that, rents are now kind of flat or even lowering. And, if you go to rent a new apartment right now, you're going to get an incentive. Maybe they're going to give you a few months free rent, or it might be lower than it was last year, or, whatever. And it's because more inventory is hitting the market in there. So when people, yes, there's probably not enough single family houses for all of the demand that's coming on, but people don't need that. They'll move out and they'll move into an apartment if it's cheaper, you know? I mean, my wife and I have been thinking about that. We have, you know, nearly $500,000 in equity in just a couple of years, and we're like, oh, why don't we just pull it out? It'll be tax free for us, and just living in an apartment for a year or two, which would be very cheap, And then all of a sudden, there's more inventory that gets created. So you're seeing inventory levels rise um, because of factors like that. I think rates. When another good signal I think is when rates go down, that's actually a big signal that the economy is hurting, right? So we all want rates to come down, but people don't really think about that. Why do rates come down? It's done to stimulate the economy. So um, right now Fed officials are meeting in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. They're deciding policy with Fed rates for the year, and likely the rumor is they're going to lower rates, um, which will create more demand, which will stimulate the economy. But that means that they're worried that, the economy is actually going in the wrong direction. And we see this also with jobs. We see our jobs report are going the unemployment slightly goes up when it first gets reported, but then when they revise it, it goes way further up. I think the report that was revised last week was the highest revision in the wrong direction that we'd seen since 2009. I mean, these are big signals. So I think we're in an election year. It's masking a lot of things that are happening. But I do think we're going to have a bigger correction probably right after the election would be that's my thinking. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. It's good to hear, and there's lessons in there as well. The
Hmm.
last thing that I wanted to follow up from a previous answer was, and I love the analogies that you get or the lessons from running that you can apply to real life. So you mentioned the fact that you took up long distance running and the fact that you wanted to do your first marathon. What's the story of the marathon? How did it go?
Yeah, that first one didn't go very well. They never do. I have a joke that, your first marathon, you do it because you're ignorant, right? A lot of people, it's a bucket list item. After that, you just do it because you're stupid. They're just painful events to go through. But I enjoy it. I've now done 13.
Oh wow.
So you can probably say I'm really, really stupid, but you learn from each one, right? So what it taught me is goal setting the right way, long over a long period of time is one of the big ones, right? So I in running with other people, they all had these big goals and they run a lot, and one of them was running the Boston Marathon. I thought, oh, that sounds cool. I want to do that one day. And then when I figured out what it took, I realized it was a lot harder than I thought. I was nearly a 5 hour marathoner. It was my first one was actually 4 hours, 52 minutes and 6 seconds. I found it the other day. And to get down below a time needed to qualify for Boston, it would have had to be below 3 hours and 15 minutes. So quite a big cut. And I thought I could do it, in my next one. So I didn't, and I got injured a lot along the way. Right. And then one of my coaches said to me, hey, you just got to make it a longer term goal and slow down and run more. I hammer it in the workouts, but running is way more than the workouts. It's what you do when nobody's watching. So I set it, this was 2014, and I set a goal to qualify for Boston by 2020. And then along the way, you just start working on a little one thing at a time, right? So one year, I just dedicated myself to being to a streak, to becoming more disciplined, which I did through streaking. Streaking is just when you run at least a mile every single day, for as long as you can. So I did it for about 2 years, and that taught me to just run all the, got me disciplined, to run regularly, and then worked on form, worked on breathing, worked on nutrition, all these different things. And every marathon I'd go to, I'd start chopping off 10, 15, 20 minutes, from my marathon time till I started the goal. They lowered the time like in 2018, I believe, to or 2017, to the qualifying time to before you turn 45 to be 3 hours and 10 minutes, or before you turn 40, sorry, it was 3 hours and 10 minutes. But you have to beat that time by so much more than all the other contestants. So I said, all right, I think if I safely want to qualify for Boston, I need to get down to about 3 hours and 4 minutes. So I just started setting that as my vision. I put it everywhere, maybe my passwords, something, some variation of that, and started racing. Just trying to visualize that. And I remember one training run where I just saw myself at the end of that training run, uh, crossing the line and seeing the clock in red letters, LED letters saying 3:04, and I just started bawling, like just crying because I felt like I had done it. But this was just a training run. And sure enough, I went to Grandma's Marathon in Duluth, Minnesota, and my time was exactly 3:04 flat. And it was such a peaceful moment. Like I just had this even the whole race, I was never nervous. I just felt like I was there, like I had already done it, right? And I was just there to show everybody that I had done it. Um, so it taught me those kind of things, long distance goals. I mean, yeah, long-term goals, setting, working on the little things in between, the short goals in between to get to your big term goal, um, discipline, surrounding yourself with other people, who are better than you. So as I would move up in paces, I learned everybody there takes has a different level of seriousness with their running, right? When I was running 5 hour marathons, people would run walk. When I got down to five, they would under four. I mean, they were, you know, walking less and taking a little more serious. Under 3:30, these folks were getting up early and they were running 5, 6 days a week, and doing other core work and what have you. So each one I learned from. So is that there's that saying about your network being your net worth, or you are the average of the five people you're around. And I'd always try to be, the slowest in the group that would, the fastest group that would allow me to be there, right? And so that helped. And before you know it, I was usually at the front of the pack with all those, even the fastest groups in our run club, which was pretty neat to see that evolution. Um, so yeah, those are some of the things that I learned
Well,
through
there's
long
about
distance
five
running.
lessons there, which are all good
Yeah,
for work or productivity. Have you got
that's right.
any that spring to mind about how you learned it from running and then you took it over to your work life or your business life and it impacted you?
That's exactly that's exactly what the project I'm working on is going to be about. About the same time, 2018, I went back to real estate. I'd taken some time off to get into the corporate world. And when I got back, I used this approach, this mindset to get back into it. And I've had more success than I've had since. I've attracted the right teammates, right, to work with, to build, to surround myself with. I have the right habits, starting off every morning with certain habits of gratitude um, and visualizations and affirmations and such that I think are important to keep working towards the goals. Some and some sustainability there, not just doing things for the short term, but things that will work over time no matter what. Even if I get sick or injured, I'll still figure out how to stay in shape. And I relate like getting sick or injured or failure or bad race to like my '08 moment. That was a failure. got sick, I got injured, but you get back up, and if you do things the right way, you get back up quickly and you probably come back better, right? So, yeah, I try to apply everything I do now that I've learned from running, and it's my big analogy. Not one that I just pull to sell something. I just do it because it's my life, you know. So,
Yeah, there's a lot there, and I wanted to pick up on something which was your when you said you got injured because you were trying to improve too quickly. I view that as kind of like a if you're trying to scale a business or whatever, and you scale too
that's
much
right.
too quickly, then obviously there's going to be some problems there. And then the visualization stuff, it was really cool to hear that you set a goal for 304 and you weren't nervous and you did it. And it's because, like I've heard it so many times, that it's because your mind kind of thinks that you have already done it.
Yeah,
So it's not a surprise for you.
that's right.
Are there any sort of visualization related things that you do in your work life?
Yeah, I have a few big goals in my the biggest one now is setting up my businesses to allow for us in 3 years. We ideally will be empty nesters in 3 years, my wife and I. And we want to just travel the world, have a nomadic life, and have a business that provides for us with that. So it's still kind of coming into fruition what that actually means, right? Like what is the number? What is the what is the exact business? I mean, it will be something around the Wayfinder Show, which is our podcast, and that's why I continue to work at it. And ideally it allow us to go around the world and meet with people who we find interesting and provide for that life for as long as we want to have it. So sometimes the goal, I should say, sometimes the goal doesn't have to be the way to get to that goal doesn't have to be very clear. Okay. I think it's just most important to set a big goal and go after it. And with and along the way, the the clarity comes, right? So running 304, when I initially set for that, that wasn't clear. That seemed impossible. There was no way I could do that initially, right? Just physically, it was not possible. But I set the intention to, work towards it. And little by little, I could, and before you know it, it seemed really possible. I knew exactly what to do in each workout, right? What were the paces I need to hit in my, short stride to my tempo workouts to whatever I did. And so I think that's the same what I'm tackling now with this goal to go. I'm not exactly sure how to set that, but that's the goal. 3 years from now, we're gonna take off on the road in the world, and we don't want to set where we're gonna go. We just know we want to go. It's a little ambiguous, and we know we want the Wayfinder show to provide for us to be able to do that.
Okay. And you mentioned the podcast. Have you any lessons you picked up there that are worth sharing?
Oh, many, many. Man, we have so many great guests and we learn so much from all of them. So one of the goals I've had is to have a business with a $50 million exit. And I wasn't sure how to do that, right? And I had a guest on, his name was Max Lewis. He built a business over 15 years of it was a propane tank exchange business, started with nothing. And he at the age of 36, he had an exit of 37 million. And I asked him how he could expedite that to within 15 years, with less than 15 years. How can you do it in 5? And he answered he's already doing it. He's got a bunch of restaurants that he's buying and rolling up together into a restaurant concept, and that's probably already worth more than his first exit. And so he talked about that, like just a roll up, start with one good foundational business, roll some more into it, and to quickly expedite the growth. And you know, I went to business school and studied this stuff and everything, but it never hit me until that moment. It was like a big aha. And then once you do that, you can actually like sit down with a spreadsheet and start to realize, okay, what's the business I should buy right now? what are the other ones that I can quickly go and add to it, you know, and get that valuation up to 50 million and do that, you know. So that's been a big one. Um, I think I don't know, there's quite a few. That's just one that came to mind right now. Um, but if you ask me again in 5 minutes, I might have a different answer for you.
Yeah, it's a good one for if you're looking to improve very quickly. I've heard it said something along the lines of, it could have taken someone their whole career or their whole working life to build a business up that large, but you can
Hmm.
buy it, in a fairly short period of time if you can get the finance, and you can essentially leapfrog or uh, essentially get that progress just with an acquisition. So it's the most efficient form of growth, essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, good point. Um, any well, on top of what you've already stated, any closing messages for us today?
Um, I think I would just say I think the biggest thing I'm working on now is to just not be afraid of how you show up, but to show up is more important, right? So there's a saying, perfection is the enemy of execution, I believe. And we all don't do things because we think we have to be perfect before we do them. And the fact is, we never are. So just get out there and do it. You know, that's why I mentioned with this project, the running away to find my way. I'm not exactly sure what it's going to look like yet, but I've outlined it. I kind of have a bunch of points for it, and every conversation I have, it becomes a little bit clearer, and I keep working on it, and you know, the universe will let us know how to present it, and make it perfect over time, you know. So just go out and try stuff, experiment, be curious, and not be afraid. Learn from it all.
A great point, and I think you've shown that you do that for sure. So for people who want to connect with you or follow you, where do they go?
Yeah, thank you. So my website is wayfindershow.com, and there you'll find all our episodes. You can sign up for our newsletter. If you want to reach out to me personally, my email is thewayfindershow@gmail.com.
Okay, Louis. Well, thank you for sharing your lessons today and your story. You've been a great guest.
Thank you so much, Thomas.